can't we just agree that midwifery care is good for women and it's good for families? It is kind of the Wild West as far as, trying to find, and that's the biggest complaint that you hear in home birth circles and community birth circles is, people have bad experiences with one or the other. And so they're like, well, I'm not, how many times have I heard people say that? Being part of, being a representative of midwifery care. We're all like, cowboys out there like, no, I'm the only one that can really do this right. And that's just ridiculous. And that's part of, why there's this infighting and so forth is like, can't we just agree that midwifery care is good for women and it's good for families? Here's what that looks like. Everybody get on board. Like, why do we have to make it like, oh, this midwife does this and doesn't do this and blah, blah. You know what? Who cares?
Yeah.
Just like literally.
Augustine Colebrook at the Midwifery Wisdom Conference, the second one, it was absolutely phenomenal. So if people can go to it next year, it's in Louisiana. I highly encourage it. But she did a really phenomenal talk about paradigm shifts and life is a game. Too many midwives play the finite game. We don't play the infinite game. We play the finite. We're thinking of our little space, our little world, our little situation. We're not thinking the bigger picture. Most other systems and things that are playing us are playing the infinite game. Like yes. She showed so many great examples through history and game. So like, it was a phenomenal speech she did. And it hit home, like, how are midwives playing the game of life? Are they just focused in little and baby and small and just what matters to them? Or what is the legacy of my children? What is the legacy of midwifery? What is the legacy of what we want for our next generation? How do we play the infinite game? Like, it was awesome.
Yeah. I like it. I'll have to.
I think she recorded it. Yeah, I'll have to ask if the team can maybe put that on their channel or podcast, but it was a really good talk. So I would love for you, because I know we talk like just the preceptor a midwife relationship. A lot of the students aren't happy with their schools, and it's interesting because I know both sides very well with the nurse midwife educational clinical expectations and the MEEC and the PAP process, and it's far more work for the CPM instructors, probably like mentors, than it is for the CNM instructors, because the schools, I think there's a lot more accountability needs to be done for the schools to do more than they're doing for these students, because that causes a ripple effect that these preceptors think they're just going to be a clinical site, but then they become a free teacher. They're finding them in their books. They're doing their classes for them because they don't quite understand what a traditional clinical site looks like. So I found that fascinating too, just with seeing the different pathways of how clinical relationships can be. The one in the community-based setting is completely different than the CNMs traditionally get from what the schools expect out of the students and expect out of their clinical sites are very different.
Yeah, it really is. There are not a lot of requirements for apprenticeship placement and so forth. And it is kind of the Wild West as far as, trying to find, and that's the biggest complaint that you hear in home birth circles and community birth circles is, I can't find a good student. And at the same time, 9 people are saying, I can't find a preceptor. And it's like, the problem is that there's not a good system, right? To kind of, to find a preceptor, to find a student. And then, people have bad experiences with one or the other. And so they're like, well, I'm not, how many times have I heard people say, well, I'm not going to take any more students because of X.
One bad stereotype. That's like the doctor saying, well, I'm never collaborating with a midwife because 10 years ago, you're reinforcing that same stigma. And it's a vicious cycle, because I know there'll be midwife schools that are like, you're criticizing us. I get they have their challenges because they're like, okay, well, add a department. Now people can't afford the school and they don't tap into FAFSA. Like, I 100% understand the midwife school's struggles. Like, I am not saying the problem with fixing all these things, as soon as you talk about one problem, it's connected to another problem, it's connected to another problem. That's where people get super frustrated, because all these barriers to expand midwifery are connected together. And so I think it's taking very few people like Augustine and I and a few other really high leaders out there. We're trying to break all these barriers at the same time together. but until other people are saying, I'm willing to change my local preceptor site, I'm willing to put boundaries of what a relationship for mentoring and structure looks like, all of us on a high level trying to make these things happen aren't going to matter if the grassroots aren't saying, I'm going to try to do my part. I'm going to try to shift how I think about students, how I approach midwifery. We have to all do it together.